You're sitting in your room, staring at a screen or a piece of paper, and your stomach suddenly drops. Maybe it's a red number on top of a math midterm that completely tanks your semester grade. Maybe it's an email saying, "Thank you for your interest, but we are unable to offer you a spot." Or maybe it's just a quiet, heavy realization that you spent months working towards a goal, a sport, an audition, an art project, or a friendship, and it completely fell apart. That exact moment, the silence in your room feels incredibly heavy. Your chest tightens, your face burns with embarrassment, and this overwhelming thought starts looping in your head. I messed up. Everyone's gonna know. I'm just not good enough. Society loves to tell us to fail forward, or that failure is just a stepping stone to success. But let's be honest. When you're the one living through it, failure does not feel like a stepping stone. It feels like a brick wall. It is painful, it is exhausting, and it is deeply frustrating. Today, we're not going to give you any empty hope or tell you to smile through the disappointment. Instead, we're going to look at the actual science of setbacks. We're going to explore why your brain reacts so intensely to missing the mark, the critical psychological line between failing at something and being a failure, and the exact evidence-based strategy you can use to rebuild when things do not go your way. Welcome back to episode 6 of Progress Over Perfect. This is your space for organizing your life, navigating the pressure of being a student, and building a resilient mindset using actual science and practical strategy. No toxic positivity, no lectures, just reality. In episode 5, we broke down confidence and looked at how self-trust is built through small wins. But what happens when you take an action, push yourself outside your comfort zone, design your routines perfectly, and still fall completely flat on your face? That is what we're tackling today. Whether it's dealing with a bad grade, getting cut from a team, losing a friendship, or struggling with a personal goal for months without seeing any results, failure is an inevitable part of the student experience. But while you cannot control the outcome of your efforts, you have total control over how your brain processes the aftermath. Let's look at what's happening beneath the surface when life hits the brakes. When we experience a major setback, we often beat ourselves up, not just for the failure itself, but how upset we feel about it. We think we should be tougher, or we shouldn't let a bad grade or social rejection ruin the week. But according to the neurological research highlighted by the National Institutes of Health, your brain does not distinguish between psychological pain and physical pain the way you think it does. When you experience a social setback, like being rejected from a peer group, making an embarrassing mistake in public, or failing to make a team, your brain activates the exact same neural pathways that light up when you experience a physical injury. When you say failure hurts, you're not being dramatic. Your brain is registering literal pain. As a teenager, the pain is amplified. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for long-term perspective and emotional regulation, is still actively developing. Because of this, a failure in the present moment feels permanent. Your brain lacks the immediate historical data to remind you will survive this, making common setbacks feel like absolute catastrophes. This sense of failure is incredibly acute when you feel like you're putting in effort but getting nowhere. In his groundbreaking book, Atomic Habits, James Clear describes this exact phenomenon as the valley of disappointment. He explains that we naturally expect progress to be linear. We assume that if we study for 2 hours every day for a month, our grades should immediately shoot up in a straight line. But progress rarely works that way. Habits compound silently and results are often delayed. When you're working hard but failing to see immediate shifts, you are trapped in that valley. It feels like you're failing, but in reality, your efforts aren't wasted. They're just being stored. Understanding this concept helped neutralize the emotional sting. It proves that feeling like a failure is often just a psychological illusion experienced right before your efforts finally break through. To break out of this painful loop, we have to understand a fundamental linguistic and a psychological distinction. The difference between failure as an event and failure as an identity. When you experience setback, your internal monologue dictates your recovery. According to the American Psychological Association, or the APA, internalizing setbacks as a permanent identity trait is the primary driver of adolescent anxiety and learned helplessness. When you convert the verb "I failed" into the noun "I am a failure," you are treating a temporary circumstance as a permanent genetic defect. This directly builds on a foundational premise from the book Atomic Habits. As James Clear writes, every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. If you look at life through this lens, a single failed exam or a bad game is just one isolated vote that didn't go your way. It does not mean you lost the entire election of your identity. An event is data. An identity is a life sentence. If you fix an event, you can change a strategy, study a different way, or practice a new technique. But you cannot fix an identity. To build true resilience, you must learn to view failure as something that happened in your environment, not something that defines your worth as a human being. So how do we train our brains to see setbacks as data rather than identity? It starts with understanding how the brain actually learns. Research out of Stanford University, pioneered by psychologist Dr. Carol Dweck, introduces us to the concept of the growth mindset. Stanford researchers tracked the brain activity of individuals encountering errors and failures. They discovered that individuals with a fixed mindset, those who believe intelligence and talent are unchangeable, showed minimal brain activity when making mistakes. Their brains essentially chose to ignore the error to protect their ego. In contrast, individuals with a growth mindset, those who believe abilities can be developed through effort and strategy, showed massive neurological activity when encountering failure. Their brains were actively processing the mistake, treating the error as an essential piece of puzzle-solving feedback. Furthermore, research from Harvard University on cognitive reappraisal shows that most resilient individuals do not ignore their negative emotions. Instead, they reframe the meaning of the stressor. Successful people across the science, sports, and academics do not possess a magical ability to avoid setbacks. They simply possess a higher tolerance for processing mistakes. They understand that a mistake triggers a neurological signal telling the brain exactly where the gap in knowledge lies. Failure isn't proof you can't do it. It is a map showing you exactly what to fix next. When a setback occurs, you need a concrete step-by-step protocol to manage the fallout. Here is your evidence-based blueprint for bouncing back when things go wrong. The first step is to allow the disappointment to exist. According to clinical guidelines from the Mayo Clinic, suppressing negative emotions like embarrassment, grief, or anger actually prolongs psychological distress. When you do poorly on a test or get rejected, do not immediately try to brush it off with a fake smile. Acknowledge it. Tell yourself, this sucks and I'm incredibly disappointed right now. Give yourself a window of time to feel that frustration. Processing the emotion cleanly prevents it from turning into long-term bitterness. The second step is to conduct a clean post-mortem. Once the initial emotional wave passes, you must transition from mourning the event to analyzing the data. Treat the failure like a scientist investigating an experiment that didn't work. Ask yourself objective questions like, what specific variables led to this outcome? If I failed a test, did I actually understand the material, or did I just memorize the notes the night before? The third step is to implement the never miss twice rule. When a failure causes us to drop a goal or break a good habit, the real damage isn't caused by the initial slip-up. It is caused by the spiral of discouragement that follows. To combat this psychological trap, James Clear outlines a powerful rule in Atomic Habits. Never miss twice. He notes, missing once is an accident. Missing twice is the start of a new habit. If you break your study routine for one night or eat poorly for one day, you haven't ruined your life. This mistake becomes dangerous only if you allow it to happen 2 times in a row. Adopting this rule gives you a practical safety net to stop a single failure from turning into a permanent downward trend. Final step is to shift from why me to what next. The longest loops of self-criticism happen when we get stuck asking, why did this happen to me? Why am I so unlucky? This keeps you trapped in a victim mindset. Highly resilient students quickly pivot the question to, what is the very next logical step I can take to alter this trajectory? If you failed a class assignment, the next step is emailing the teacher for feedback. If you lost a competition, the next step is adjusting your practice schedule for tomorrow. This week, we're going to practice processing a mistake in real time. Your assignment for the next 7 days is to find one recent setback, something that happened this month, whether it's a poor grade, a missed opportunity, or a goal you dropped the ball on, and perform a clean post-mortem while applying the Never Miss Twice framework from Atomic Habits. Get a piece of paper and write down 2 columns. Column 1 needs to be the facts. What objective actions did I take, and what was the actual outcome? Column 2 needs to be the strategy shift. What is one thing I will do differently next time based on this data to ensure I protect my routine and do not miss twice? Strip away the insults and strip away the labels. Treat the situation as useful feedback. Teach your brain right now that a setback is just an unfinished project, not a final grade on who you are. Thank you for tuning into episode 6 of Progress Over Perfect. Falling down is always inevitable. How you choose to look at the ground you fall on is entirely up to you. If this episode helped you reframe a disappointment you're dealing with right now, please like, subscribe, and share it with a classmate or friend who might be beating themselves up over a mistake. Be kind to yourself. Separate your identity from the results. Protect your daily habits and keep moving forward. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you next time.